made with love for the classics and an inclusive, boundary-pushing approach to storytelling. Hello and welcome to Liam's Lyceum. I'm your host, Liam, aka Himvar. Today we'll be doing a spoiler-free review of New Edge, Sword and Sorcery, Issue 2. I have previously reviewed issues 0 and 1 on this channel, one relatively recently as well, and the pilot, or issue 0, being free digitally, which I forgot to mention in my last video, and it is at cost if you buy it physically, so it's pretty cheap. Now, of course, this is from the editor-in-chief is Oliver Brackenbury, who opens up this issue discussing the topic of glut in Sword and Sorcery. This means, among other things, a broader range of storytelling. And let's see where that puts the stories this issue, and which ones may or may not be for you. I'll go over each and every one of them. And the glut thing is also a nice call out to Jason Ray Carney, in my opinion. So the first story is The Demon of Tasha Zhang of Dariel Kyoga. It's a very good opening. It is illustrated by Aldo Oyeda. And it is about, well, it starts with a squad of cavalry looking for Orhan Timur, the snow leopard. They come across a group of monks on pilgrimage to the shrine of Tasha Zhang in the mountains. Kyog is quite talented and well experienced with the craft, I'd say at this point. He's easy to read. The story is conveyed simply and it's entertaining. It's similar in ways to Harold Lamb, the idea being it's kind of Asian steppe inspired. I think Mongolia and Tibet are the vibes here, is what I would say. Orhan being essentially a fictional brother of Genghis Khan, but secondary world as well. It's fast-paced and well-executed. The art on the cover by Gilead is actually from the story. And it deals with red rage and calm in good fashion, and the ending is a nice touch to an already good yarn. And then the next story, Fang, by Jackie Kawaja, which is illustrated by Ursa Doom. This is about a sister and brother on the hunt. Our main character is Sigrid, once apprenticed to the village seer, now a hunter like her elder brother, Ulf. Ulf has lost his voice from an illness, it seems, and their village of Littengard seems to be in hard times, so that's why these hunts are important. The two track a beast that does not quite seem to fit the natural kind that you normally hunt, of course. This hunt then quickly turns horrifying, or maybe not even quickly, it turns horrifying, but it's executed very well. It's not wasting time, but it creeps up on you. This isn't, quite a fairy tale's dark forest. I'd say it's worse. Draugr come to mind, and there's for good reason. It's well done revealing of what's going on, and of course, you get some good Sword and Sorcery Eldritch stuff going on. And yeah, it's a good ending as well. There's also great echoes of a hunting of a wolf and a character named Ulf, which means wolf, if you couldn't tell. And it has a great use of voice. I mean this in two ways, and I'll let you read it for yourself to figure out what I mean. But I really enjoy this one. Actually, I really enjoy this one. The third story is Revelstoke by Game of Files, illustrated by Saprofile. If the last story felt early medieval, this one feels high medieval, like something you might read in the Old Moon Quarterly. It's a dark Europe, our world, but fantastic. It also seems like the likes of Saint Boniface weren't as successful in converting peoples to Christianity. It follows a group, Therma, Rolf, Jan, Al, Egbert, Eve, maybe some others I'm forgetting. It's quite a large group as they go to Revelstoke and encounter things like the undead. That's the important part here. This is battled with blade and witchcraft. It's funny that we get stories with this kind of Draugr theme, one after the other. But here we get this idea that death is inexorable and you can't always beat it, though you can laugh at it. There's angst here too, some memorable lines. A pelican, the bird, not an axe, is involved as well, plays a fun role. The next story is A Debt Forgotten, A Debt Unpaid by Jeremy Pack Nelson, illustrated by Damiano DiMarco. Aumquai, the Bloodwritten, has been a slave for half a century. The story starts with his considerable bulk in a tub before he is bled for some magical purpose. He seems long-lived by his references, and we do find out that he is. His blood seems to be used for the Empire's weapons of war, and his longevity is due to a blessing by old, outdated gods, which seem to have this has seemed to have gotten him imprisoned in the first place. The story itself deals with gods and mirrors, and I'd say that it's I don't know, repose that isn't really meant to be. The mood is very good and dominates the story, and I quite enjoyed it. The next story is The Eyes of the Demon by J.M. Clark, illustrated by Morgan King, the Spine of Night fame. Kiembe returns, but don't worry if you haven't read any of the other stories. Clark has written featuring the man. This one takes place in the freezing Sothpeti Mountains. The red-eyed warrior wizard finds himself in an unlikely alliance because of a common enemy. There's a woman with a matic for a weapon, which is cool to see. Oh, and a sword and soul, which again is sword and sorcery, but inspired by African landscapes and myth. And the story is pleasingly brutal and involves a demon, if you just want to know. Water is the next story. Water, which laughs at all things, I should say, is the full title. It's by T.K. Rex and L. Ann Quignon. It's illustrated by Magda Kolbicka. This is essentially assembling a party to save Ak the poet's sister, Navicht. I'm saying that right. Some interesting use of archaic language. Best described as biblical, I'd say, such as baguette and verily. It also seems like it reminds me of like southwestern deserts of the United States, or also those near that same area but across the border in Mexico. It's got poetry, which is quite good in reality, and it covers themes of family, water, slavery, and the like. Again, just another good one. Different vibes, with a lot of these actually. And then the next one is Atonement for a Resurrected God by David C. Smith, illustrated by Simon Underwood. Adrian and Versa travel together, and Adrian singing a tune at the start, and Versa is unhappy, as the tune is about a god. Adrian does worship a certain deity, and they go aboard a ship to Siricion to protect Lord Tarius on his journey. Of course, there is an offer of good reward, and even more obvious, there is potential danger. The story has mucus-covered creatures mumbling about old and new gods. There's magical protection and hints of a good time. The title is cheeky. I think it works. There's some creepy stuff going on here. And the story feels very grounded, which, can be a problem with some short stories, feeling rather ethereal or maybe being forgettable in the end. But Smith is a veteran, and he definitely shows it here. I have a hard time saying which one would be my favorite in this issue, but I really like this one. But I've liked many of them. But then the next story is How Many Deaths Till Vengeance by June Orchid Parker. I believe this is the last story, actually. So it's illustrated by Matthew Spencer. Astartha is weary from travel when she happens upon a house. A slave of the owner's sets her up for the night. She discovers a connection between herself and the master of the house, and it doesn't have any pleasant associated feelings. Not what we would normally call pleasant, at least. The story goes from rather peaceful with wariness to fiery rage. I'd say it staggers a little with dialogue in places I feel was, maybe a little unneeded. Just a couple lines, I was thinking. But overall, it's an interesting tale, marked by a sorcery of the immortality bent. It also tackles violence against queer folk, particularly transgender folk. In fact, the main character is male but identifies as a woman. And then it's very easy to read and to follow. And I like how Parker used the word woundedness. You don't see that one much. The art on the last page of the story may be my favorite in the issue as well. I just think it's just a very vivid image, and it works really well with what's happening in the story, of course. And of course, that's about 80% of the issue, and that's the fiction. And I'll just talk briefly about the nonfiction as well. First up is Neurodivergence in the Sword and Sorcery by Jonathan Olfert, illustrated by Remco van Straten. This is an article that is exactly as it sounds. Olfert does a good job seeing the potential space sword and sorcery can be for neurodivergent writing, for either a small presence in stories to a big one in narrative. He also looks at Conan and Weird Tales' fascination with madness. My favorite sword and sorcery stories that I've written, I should say, I felt like they were written in the grip of madness themselves. So I kind of understand what Olfert's getting at here, I think. Isn't that the idea? I'm not sure. No, Olfert does a good job here. He doesn't really waste any time. It's a very swift article. And then Sword and Soul Brothers by Milton J. Davis, illustrated by Chua Shin. which, same as phenomenal art as issue 1 here. This is about Davis's writing his own sword and soul out of the same desire to separate, same desire that Charles Saunders had, but separate, right? They're not exactly connected. He actually hadn't read Saunders before writing his own sword and soul, and then his later devouring of Saunders' works and getting to meet the creator of Imuro and Desuye, that conjured, this person that conjured Sword and Soul, right, from Sword and Sorcery. This is the most touching nonfiction piece this time around, I think, and I'm excited to read more of Saunders' work, as I've really only started it, but definitely worth my time, worth your time if you haven't read it, if you can find it. It's a little tough to get sometimes, and, of course, money is not unlimited, sadly. I wish I could conjure that, but it will be done. Eventually I will read more of this, and it's very touching again, and good jobs by Davis. And then the next one is Sword and Silk, which is an interview with Daryl Keogh, written from an episode from So I Am Writing a Novel. It's a transcript, essentially, just like we had one in the first issue. We get a nice look at, Keogh's work, like Snow Leopard, and also the Silk Road or Asian-inspired sword and sorcery. This premiered on Valentine's Day of 2022, if you'd rather listen to it, but I definitely am looking forward to reading more of Keogh's stuff, which includes this, I think it's Tracks of the Snow Leopard is the book. Again, I don't have a copy of that yet, but I'm being reminded of books I need to check out. There is a lot, and maybe there is like a lot, as the start of the issue talks about. But anyways, finally we have a review for the Return of the Sorceress by Silvia Moreno Garcia, reviewed by Chris Viasmial. It's a good reminder to read it again. I have not yet done so, and I look forward to partaking even more now. I didn't actually know much about it beforehand anyways. So, and there's actually, for those who, like this stuff, there's content warnings on the back page as well of the issue. And overall, there's another great offering that you should take note of and read when the chance arises. Definitely if you want some good contemporary sword and sorcery, which I think you should try out. And just, whether you don't read short stories or you're not familiar with sword and sorcery, or you are, either way. So there should be something here to enjoy for everyone. And I mean everyone. I realize maybe you don't think so, but I think so. I'll catch you next time.